All Indiana Politics is your premier source for Indiana politics, focusing on issues that matter to you.
I still want us to be the best in the Midwest.
We can't afford another lockdown.
Give the citizens of this country the relief they need.
Education in the state of Indiana remains priority number one.
In-depth, nonpartisan coverage.
We don't know exactly where the economy will be in January.
People are worried with good reason.
Exclusive interviews with Indiana's political leaders.
We have the resources here in the state of Indiana to care for those who are in need.
Expert analysis on critical legislation.
We need to reform those laws.
This recovery is going to take some time.
We've got to anticipate that there'll be a budget shortfall.
From Wish TV, this is All Indiana Politics Podcast on the All Indiana Podcast Network.
I'm Garrett Bergquist, government reporter for Wish TV and the producer of All Indiana Politics. Voters in Indiana's 6th Congressional District will pick a new member of Congress this fall. Congressman Greg Pence is not running for re-election. The 6th District runs from southern Indianapolis to the Ohio state line. 3 people are running to succeed Pence, and you might recognize their names. Republican Jefferson Shreve ran unsuccessfully for mayor of Indianapolis last year. Democrat Cinde Wirth ran against Pence 2 years ago, and Libertarian James Sceniak ran for the Senate in 2022. I sat down with Sceniak to discuss his reasons for running. With us now is the Libertarian candidate for Indiana's 6th Congressional District, James Sceniak. James, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on.
Why are you running for Congress?
I believe that Hoosiers need an alternative choice from the Republicans and Democrats. They need someone to better represent them, and I believe I can do that in the 6th District.
The economy is playing a big role in this election, especially the cost of housing and inflation. What are your plans to address those two issues?
We got to get it under control, and ultimately a lot of inflation is due to Washington, D.C. spending. We've seen an increase in spending on both the Republican and Democrat side. They're clearly not fixing this issue. So there's a lot of things we could do about inflation, but ultimately we look at the spending in Washington, D.C. and having to rein down that, look at the budget there, and then once we get that under control, it'll have a trickle-down effect, and it'll definitely benefit Hoosiers once we do that.
What's your plan for the southern border?
We definitely need to secure our southern border. It's important that we have a secure nation, but also, like President Ronald Reagan said, we also need to be a city on a hill for immigrants. So it's a balance. So a very secure border, but we also need a process that allows immigrants in who want a better life in America.
What would that process look like?
We're going to vet them. We're going to make sure that they're here for the best interest of Americans, but also making sure that we have a clear way in. The lottery system isn't really working. The way we allow immigrants in now doesn't allow for enough legal immigrants to come in, and that's why we see so many illegal immigrants coming in. Once we get that process streamlined, we'll see less people trying to cross the border illegally and come through a legal process where they can be vetted. So it's a win-win for Americans once we get that situated and under control.
We had another school shooting this fall, this time at a high school in Georgia. How should Congress address this issue? Other developed countries don't have the level of mass shootings we do.
I mean, my heart goes out to, the schools and the issue, and it's very real. We've seen it even in 2020 when I was running, in 2020 as well. 2022. It's an issue that keeps coming up, and we've got to do something better. I want to look at schools and how we can secure schools better. We can make sure the doors are locked. When I worked within a school, there's a 3-door system, security system. So making sure that we have those securities in place, and working with teachers for better emergency responses, working with police officers. And then the last topic I'd like to address is just mental health in general. Sadly, a lot of these shootings come from people who really could benefit from mental health. And when we address those issues at the core and address their heart issues, we'll see a decrease in crime. So getting people mental health and increasing that in our health system as Americans.
Our national debt is now at $35 trillion and climbing. How do you plan to get that under control?
Well, this is, again, where Democrats and Republicans have failed us. They don't have a plan to decrease spending. We have to look at an actual real plan. And, I look at Ron Paul's penny plan and how to decrease spending within Washington, D.C. We don't run businesses like that. Hoosiers are great at running businesses, but you can't run in a deficit forever. So we have to get that under control. And that's ultimately we're looking at each branch of the government and how do we reduce each by, like the penny plan suggests, 1% within the first year and then continue to decrease, and a realistic approach. But it has to be done and it has to be reined in. Republicans and Democrats are definitely not doing this right now.
How do you ensure that you minimize the pain that might inflict on people who depend on government services? Because like right here in Indiana, we've had the issue where about 1,600 medically complex children have been removed from the attendant care program to close a $1 billion Medicaid hole. That's exactly just it. We need a strategic way to do this. And a lot of times, when the Democrats point to the Republicans, it's oh, we're going to hurt these individuals when we reduce the spending. But there's lots of ways to reduce spending without hurting the Medicaid, and looking at actual sustainable ways to do this. Competition increases, so as we have competition within the market, we look at simple ways of government spending. We can look at what is the best methods of transportation within our vehicles. We can look at cars, simple things such as office paper. Are we really getting the true price? A lot of times in Washington, D.C., it's not about competition and looking at the lowering prices. It's who's buddies with who, what deals can we give them. And so when we take out the middlemen and we look at straight prices, we can reduce that without harming Medicaid or our individuals within the Hoosier state. Let's turn to foreign policy. Should the United States continue to supply military aid to Ukraine? So Ukraine's a very interesting situation, and I believe our spending there is gotten out of hand. We need to promote peace, no matter where that is. And Ukraine is one of those places we need to promote peace between Russia and Ukraine. We can do that with economic with our economy, right? So we can look at how to put economic pressure on Russia, how to tell you without the spending on Ukraine. So we have to have a win-win there. I think that too many times we've interfered with foreign policy in foreign countries. And so I think putting a little bit more economic pressure on Russia and promoting peace there is the solution. What about aid to Israel? Again, our allies, we have to respect our allies, and Israel has been a strong ally, especially in the Middle East. So very important to respect our allies. That being said, we need to promote peace first. We need to promote economic stability within the Middle East and promote that peace. We need to encourage Israel to look first for peace so that the civilian casualties that we're seeing on both sides are reduced. It's burdensome and it should be worrisome when we see children dying. So on both sides, we need to see that stopped. And but we also need to support our allies. So I want to be clear. So would you continue military aid to Israel or Ukraine? Israel, definitely yes. Ukraine, I'd have to look a little bit more at. They're not part of the UN. It's a complicated situation. They were about to join. So looking at that situation, it's possible that some aid would be given to Ukraine. We've talked a lot about national level issues so far. What are some things that are specific to the 6th Congressional District that you would want to work on? Like you mentioned, the economy, I think, is the most important right now. Hoosiers work hard for their money. We want to have money in our wallets so we can spend it on our children, our grandchildren, and have a future with the economy. So making sure that Washington, D.C. is looking out for our grandchildren within the economy, reducing the debt. I believe in the 6th District, they want a candidate that supports our constitutional amendments, including the Second Amendment. I don't believe the other candidates support it fully. So it's about Hoosiers, and it's about Hoosier rights and about policy, looking out for our neighbors, looking out for our farms in the 6th District. So multiple ways we can do that. What do you say to voters who might look at you and say, well, if I vote for the Libertarian, that just ensures that the Democrat or the Republican, whichever one I dislike more, gets elected.
It's kind of old rhetoric. I have to earn your vote. If I'm not earning your vote, then don't vote for me. But ultimately, it's old rhetoric to scare you away from a third-party vote. Ultimately, vote for who's going to best represent you in the 6th District, in the Senate, as president. Look for that candidate. Don't be scared with your vote. Vote the way your heart tells you to. It's just old rhetoric, and it really doesn't work anymore.
What makes you the best choice in this race? I
could work with both sides. Back to the, taking votes from the Democrat, taking votes from Republican. When I ran for U.S. Senate, I got accused of being a Democrat as a Libertarian. I got accused of being a Republican as a Libertarian. But really what that showed was I'm willing to work with both sides on issues that are important to Hoosiers. I could go to Washington, D.C. and be able to be that middleman for Hoosiers and be able to negotiate with both sides so that Hoosiers end up winning and it's not just a Republican issue or it's not just a Democrat issue.
James Sceniak, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
That was James Sceniak, Libertarian candidate for Indiana's 6th Congressional District. Remember, you can catch All Indiana Politics every Sunday morning at 9:30, only on Wish TV. I'm Garrett Bergquist. Thanks for listening.
From Wish TV, this is All Indiana Politics Podcast on the All Indiana Podcast Network. Watch All Indiana Politics live Sunday mornings at 9:30 on Wish TV and at wishtv.com. Subscribe to this podcast and listen weekly here on the All Indiana Podcast Network. And be sure to discover even more great podcasts at allindianapodcastnetwork.com.